Hi friends, this is Vema Reddy. So today we will see how we can create a REST web services with Workato. Okay, so to save the time, and I have already created the setup and everything. I have also created the end-to-end example. First, I will start with the demo how this API works, and then we will just similarly build how to uh, start from the scratch and to run end to end. Okay, the first thing is I am trying to read a data from a database. Okay, for example, I have created a Wokato demo, and so I'm just going to have only one table in this Wokato demo, and so that's one I'm going to read from the database. So as soon as when I send a request to the web services, and this web services will going to read the data from this table, and then it will return the results. So I have already created the table and the data is loaded, and you can see the list of columns. Probably I'm returning all the columns. Okay. Now because I have used the Postman here to test this API behavior, you can see that this web service is hosted on the Workato APIM, and you can see that there is a name I have given request name which contains the version as well, and the object, the endpoint what I'm trying to insert. So I'm passing the API token since this is a secured one, and I'm not passing anything for the get. I'm just going to trigger this send button. Okay, so you can see that this has the structure has this one. So this REST endpoint, it did not accept any request, and it just returns the response. So for that, you can see how the response structure is there. So you want to simply copy and analyze this response. So you just copy this one and just go to this and just go to the language and then JSON. Okay, you can see that it has returned a list of persons. It just given ID, first name, last name, and birth year. And this is a kind of array, and the persons is the one which is an object. Okay, all these array items is being embedded into the person's one. So first, this is the how this sample response is returning. But we will now go ahead and see how exactly we will configure the web services, how to create the recipe, and what are the first thing is prerequisite to create these web services, and then we will just run it end to end and we will see. I for this to make this video length little short, I am just go little faster. In case if you are not able to grasp in one shot, you can just go and revisit the video. Okay. Okay, the first thing is whenever you log in into Workato, right? So you will see specifically for this web services, you need to come back and see that the platform, you can see API platform is available or not. The prerequisite for creating the web services in Workato is you should have access to API platform. By default, you will have an access when you create a trial account. So you should have the access to this one. Once you go to this API platform, here is the where you can create the API collections. The API collection, the first thing what we need to understand is API collection. So if we ever worked on with Postman, it is very similar to that is a Postman collections. You see what the Postman collection is. First thing is your Postman collection is a kind of way to organize a list of endpoints based on business domain or functionality, whatever it is as per your requirement. So similarly, here is there is a API collection. So in this API collections, you have to create first your collection. So this way I created the collection. For example, now if I create a new collection. So when we are trying to create a new collection, it means the collection is generally refers to same set of application. You can consider this as one application, the one client you want to give an access, you can create a one collection, or you can create based on the functionality domain. For example, you want to expose all the services for the HR domain, for the business domain, for the invoice, for the order management, whatever. So you can create a list of APIs. So here you can create two types of collections here. One is a recipe collection, another one is a proxy collection. So as the name says, proxy means you are not going to build any web services or a service. It is just route the traffic from your the client. For example, now you are a client, okay, you are trying to access to another service which is a legacy based services. Maybe you want to use Workato as a middle layer. So to do that API governance related things, for example, you want to enforce the security things, or you want to validate authentication, authorization, but you as a Wokato is not going to take that request and consume it and then manipulate or process the request. It won't do in terms of proxy. It will just forward the request to the server. Wokato is just a middleman here. It takes the request from the client and then it forwards to the server, and server, whatever the response it returns, it just it. The responsibility of the Wokato here is to just do the authentication and authorization. But whereas recipe collection, what it means that it takes a request and you have an option to build a logic what you wanted to do, execute, and then return the response. It means you are exposing the API and then you are also building the recipe, the process logic, what you wanted to do after you receive a request. So here is the one we are going to create it for this. For example purpose, I'm just going to create the recipe collection here. So you want to use existing recipes, or you want to import a open API specification. If you already have an open API specification, you can use that, or else you can just create an existing recipe. But I have already an existing recipe. Okay, now we will just go ahead and select create the recipe here, and then we'll come back to this. Because see, when you want to create a collection, either you have an specification to be ready or your existing recipe to be ready. So then you select the recipe folder, and then any API recipe in this folder will be linked to new endpoint. Means what type of recipe it is expecting? It is expecting a recipe of type API. Okay, so that's where you need to select it. Once you come back, you can just click on this and able to proceed with the other settings. First, now to make it simple, first we'll go to the projects, and then I will just create another service here. I'll create a folder here. So I'm just going to create the rest services here and then click on create folder. You can see one service is created. Now I already have connected a database connections. I'm not going to create a new connection. Okay, but instead I'm going to create the recipe. Okay, click on create here. Make sure you are in this folder. Now I'm going to create the recipe here. Now, whenever you create a recipe, what you need to do is build an API endpoint. How to select this is the triggering mechanism. It means once you select this as a triggering point, so it means once this recipe will trigger the automatically run when the request is received. Okay, and the recipe that you are trying to build, it exposed as a endpoint. Okay, now I'm just going to create get all, okay, persons. Okay, I'm just going to give it. I selected the build as an, now click on start building. The moment when you click on start building, it creates the new recipe with build an API endpoint as a triggering mechanism. And since it is API based and triggers as soon as the request is received, and you need to return the response also. In order to return the response, you have an option to put an action and select. Here is search for API here, and then you can see API platform by Wokato. You select the app, and then you see the list of actions. List of actions is only is to return it. So now you select the response, okay? Because this response comes from this trigger. So once you select the trigger, you have an option to define the request and response structure. Okay, now just click on this close button, and now you go ahead and select what type of request you want to accept, what type of response you want to return. To make it simplify for the get all method, I'm not going to take any input from the web services request. I only return the response. So in that case, what we need to do is we just need to define the response structure, no request structure. So to make it simplify, I'm just going to zoom out a little bit. So request section, I'm minimizing it since I don't need anything. For the response section, you can define that response type is of JSON type. Yes, I want to return the JSON as a response. I don't want to accept any specific, I don't want to return any specific headers. So that's why I'm not going to here. I want to return the responses. Okay, I go ahead and click on the response here. So you can see the response one. It means you can add any number of responses you want. Because for example, for 200, you want to return one set of response. For 400, you want to return another response, like depends on the HTTP status code. Now I want to select this is 200 is okay for this response one. I'm going to give it as success response. Okay, I'm just putting the HTTP code also. So now I go and define either you have a sample JSON, you can use it, or you can use even the sample also. For example, now I already have a sample JSON. I can quickly, or else I can even quickly go ahead and add a fields manually. I want to return the persons. Okay, I'm going to give this as a small. This persons is not a string. This person is a list. Okay. Under this, I'm going to return I'll just put the same. So I'm going to create this structure here. Under the persons, I want to build all these names. Okay. So now you just go ahead and add a field. Okay. Now you can add one more field saying that you have ID. Okay. So I'm for the making simplicity, I'm going to define all the fields. Okay. For example, now I have an option to add. Okay. But this is coming as a sibling. I want to add this as nested. Okay, so next time we'll show you how you can do that. Okay, you can see that how you can do this. You have an option where you want to add this one. Okay, now it automatically adds this one, so you don't need to make it this one. So now let me go to another one. Let me select this and then let me add. Okay, that's all I wanted to return it. So now I defined it 200 response, but you want to define any other schemas. So other different type of schema you want to return for 400 or any other HTTP status code, you are free. Feel free to add this one. So now go to this response and you can see that the one which you define it automatically available. Okay, now in order to fetch the data from a database, I have already have the action which is defined this Oracle database and then select rows. Okay, I want to select all the rows. You can see I selected the batch. Okay, I selected this one. I want to select the table as Workato dot t persons. So you can see that I want to select all the columns here. Click on OK. That's all. So it will connect and to the database and it will return all the schemas. Now I want to map all the columns from here to here. So since the reason I've defined a person says I have a more than one rows can be written, that's why I have selected. So you make sure you select the list one with the rows. So once you select the list only, this rows button will be make it as a square box. You can see now I did not select it, but even the moment when you select the list one, it automatically turns into the rows as a rectangular box. So now you just select it or drag it. So now you select the last name here, it automatically comes, but you can take the suggestion or else you can also go ahead and easily drag and drop it. Okay, now I defined it. I did the mapping and I'm able to map this one. Once comes the request, I'm querying all the records from the database and then I'm just returning it as it is. Okay, now I have created the process or the recipe and then we just go ahead and go back to the platforms, API platform. Now I define the collection. Okay. Now let's go ahead and create a new collection here. I select the recipe since I wanted to expose the existing one. Now I want to select the REST services folder. So what it will do, it try to find out all the recipes that has a trigger as a API is a triggering mechanism. Now you can see it automatically identify get all persons. Okay, the endpoint will be giving like this. Click on next. Now you can just get the collection name. Maybe you can just give that person's REST service. Maybe you can just put 1.0 and you can just copy paste this one, create the collection. Okay, once you create collection, you can see collection is already created, one endpoint automatically added, view API collections. Okay, now it is ready. Okay, now you need to trigger this one. In order to trigger this one, you have to give an access. So how do you can see the URL will be here and you go to the client here, grant client access. So select the clients to whom you want to access the collection. So now you select why I have already created the public is a client. Okay, so I'm just going to give the same one here. Click on save. Okay, so it means the one client I have created, with that you will be able to create it. For example, now you want to create this one also. You go to here clients, you can add a new client here, and then you just click on put some description and just click on next. That's all. It just automatically create the one client. And okay, for example, now I want to do this for testing purpose. I want to do this test. Maybe I can just put this as a postman as the name. Click on next. An authentication token, what type of authentication you want to use. There is a lot of authentication. It supports for the time being. We will use the auth token and API collections to be included. You can see that this is the one we created. This is a collection. So this same authentication token will be applied to entire collection. It means all the endpoints that is available here, it will applies. Now you have if you define any policy, it will also apply the policy. But anyway, we are not defining any policy. Policy means it will add additional restrictions on the API level. So now you can see that the API client also created it. So now the Postman is the client is created. We did not add any policy, but we already selected to which services this client should be associated. Now we go ahead and create the API key. We'll just create the same name as Postman. We don't give anything, just click on generate. And you can see that this is the API key has been created. So now I'll just go ahead and click on duplicate. So I will just you need to pass this as a header as this one. Okay, so this is the one I created. Now close it. Make sure you save this one, otherwise it won't be. By default, it will be activated. In case you want to rename any of the things, you can even this one. Okay, now go back and go to the API collections. Go to the person's service, which has this one. It's a two client access it is has. So now this is the one we have to activate this one. So now activate the endpoint. It means this recipe is not yet running. So you have to make this as a running. So once this endpoint is running, the recipe associated with the endpoint is not running. Start the recipe. Okay, you just go to this one here and then start the recipe here. You see, you just click on start. Instead of you test recipe, you just start the recipe so that it will be running. Okay, now this recipe is started. Now you can see the active and it is started. Now you go back and just click on the refresh. So now you activate this endpoint. Okay, activate this endpoint. The starting recipe is just recipe will be activated, and activating this endpoint is the API will be enabled. So now we are good to go, and then click on this one URL. I'm just going to copy this one. Okay, just go and click on send here. Okay, it says access to this API has been disallowed. Okay, so it says this is not the authentication it is telling. Okay, now you go to these two clients. You just edit these clients. I don't know why it is, but let's save this one. Okay, now let's go to this. Okay, now let's, okay, maybe it is not unauthorized. Now let's go to this one. Let's get this is the endpoint URL for this endpoint. Okay, just click on, because earlier we have given the endpoint for the collection. Now we should give the endpoint for this particular endpoint. Okay, now you can see that the request has been triggered and it has returned the result as well. So now you just go to this one. Since this is already triggered, right? So you should be able to see that jobs. Okay, you can see that this job has been triggered, and API platform by Workato, API calling API. You just click on this one, you will be able to see the execution. Just click on this. You can see that the input nothing, because we are not passing any request, because this is just define the structure. We did not pass any input in the request, but instead it just returns the metadata. Who is the calling this API? Like what type of authentication it is used, what is the profile ID, what is the client ID he has. So everything is a client name is Postman, and this like how who is going to access this one. This you can all, if you want to put a restriction or conditions, or you want to validate this one, still you can do the, you can add a conditions here and you can verify, as long as if you are properly verifying this is the only client it should be access these services, or you want to add additional conditions, you can still validate this one. So once you see that, you just go to here and you can see there is a two rows has been fetched from the database, and you can see that this is the endpoint. It has been return all the response, which is response code is 200 and the response structure is this one. So this is the simple API to very simple, but you can extend this one to have additional capabilities for this one. But I just wanted to show you a quick way to this. But in case you want to export a job report, and you can do a lot many things here. Before you starting this one, you can also display the additional information for this one. What I mean to say, by default, it shows the description, but you have an option to add a field and you can just display how you wanted to get the response. For example, now you just click on the stop the recipe. Okay. Now go to this, customize this job report, and you can tell that, okay, client name. For example, you want to see who is going to trigger this one. So now you go to this API request, API client. Okay, you just put this, drag and drop this name. And also you can just put client IP address. So you can just put who is going to, what is IP address going to trigger. So as soon as you define all these things and apply change, and you can see the names will be visible. This only visible when you did not start the recipe. But when you start the recipe, and this time you can see the by default description will not be visible. Now you can just go ahead and click on send one more time. You will be able to, okay, just refresh one more time to see if that request has been reached. You can see the names, however the names you want, you can able, but you can also search with the names by the name Postman. Okay, once you click on enter, by default, it also verifies, because this one, it has in the inside the description. That's why it is also returning. So you have a lot of options to filter, how you want to filter this one things, but it is a very basic example how you can create and expose a recipe as in a web services, so that the and third party systems and can make a call and consume the web services. Okay, that's all I wanted to show you in this video. Thank you so much for watching this video. Please comment out in case if you have any questions. Thank you.